Hey there. This is part 2 of a series on how men use the performance of femininity to confuse the boundaries of women. In the first video, I read an excerpt from the book Why Does He Do That?, a book about abusive men. I explained a particular type of abusive man who presents himself as being a very sensitive man, yet that does not change the fact that he's still abusive. So in this video, I'm going to be reading an excerpt from the book Gynecology by Mary Daly. She has a section where she talks about, she uses the symbolism of Apollo, the Greek god, and his counterpart, Dionysus, to illustrate this same type of idea. So Apollo generally represents sort of what we would consider like that stereotypical masculine man, that dominating type of male figure. Dionysus, I'm not sure if I'm even saying that right, but whatever, is his counterpart, or I think maybe his brother or something, that basically is this feminine man, right? And this is an actual Greek god that is used in a lot of stories and stuff, but she brings them up as a comparison in what they symbolize. I do want to just say, as a side note, reading from Mary Daly's book here, I will probably be paraphrasing things a little bit, just making slight modifications to what she's writing just so that it can be better understood, because Mary Daly's the kind of writer where sometimes it's hard to follow what she's talking about if you haven't read the part of the book that precedes the section I'm reading. So I'll just be sort of making minor modifications to what's being said here, just so that you guys can understand a little better. Okay, so she writes, "We can well be suspicious of male fascination with the all too feminine Dionysus, for his mythic presence foreshadows attempts to eliminate women altogether. This femininity of Dionysus should be seen also as connection to his glorification as a boundary violator, and as one who drives women mad. A clue to the meaning of this maddening boundary violation is unwittingly provided by Norman O. Brown, who writes of Dionysus as the mad god who breaks down boundaries. According to Brown, he says, the soul that we call our own is not a real one. The solution to the problem of identity is to get lost. This Dionysian temptation to, quote, get lost, is not unfamiliar to women. Whether our background has been Christianity, Eastern spirituality, liberated liberalism, straight suburban society, all of the above, it doesn't matter. This is the seductive invitation to lose the self in order to find it. Whether the loss takes place through the glorified pain of feminine Christian masochism, or through the, quote, pleasurable, unquote, torture of S&M rituals, or through determined devotion to higher causes, the result is the same: female annihilation. Although countless women are reduced to this tragic loss of self, the fabricators of the destructive plot are male. Attributed to Dionysus is the ability to shatter cognitive boundaries in women, that is, the capacity to drive women mad, which he did whenever possible. Madness is the only ecstasy offered to women by the Dionysian way, while the supermasculine Apollo, as a contrast, overtly oppresses and destroys with his contrived boundaries and hierarchies, rules and roles. The feminine Dionysus blurs the senses, seduces and confuses his victims, drugging them into complicity, offering them his heart as a love potion, which actually poisons. The rituals of romantic love, as well as those of religion, draw women into the, quote, ecstasy, unquote, of self-loss, the madness which is literally standing outside of ourselves, being beside ourselves. The Dionysian solution for women, which is violation of our own gynocentric boundaries, is the final solution. And she writes the final solution with capital letters. To succumb to this seductive invitation is to become incorporated into the mystical body of maledom, which is to become a sort of living dead woman, forever pumping our own energies into the heavenly head of the male god, losing our heads. The destructive power of Dionysian deception hinges on the invitation to incorporate or assimilate, resulting in an inability to draw our own lines, our own boundaries. To accept this invitation is to become unhinged and dismembered. The madness which is Dionysian's final solution for women is confusion, the inability to distinguish her female self and her process from the male-made masquerade. Dionysus sometimes assumed a girl-like form. The phenomenon of the drag queen or the feminized man or the trans woman dramatically demonstrates each boundary violation. Just like whites playing blackface, he imitates the oppressed role without actually being incorporated into it. In the phenomenon of transgenderism, the incorporation and confusion is even deeper. The seduction of women, including feminists, into confusion by Dionysian boundary violating happens under a variety of circumstances. A common element seems to be an invitation to, quote, freedom, unquote. The feminine Dionysian male guru or therapist invites women to spiritual or sexual liberation at the cost of loss of self and boundaries, physical and spiritual, in a male-dictated behavior. Male propagation of the idea that men, too, are feminine, particularly through feminine behavior by males, distracts from the fact that femininity is a construct, a man-made construct, having essentially nothing to do with actual femaleness. The seductive preachers of androgyny dwell upon this theme of blending. When they put on the mask of Dionysus, the myth masters play the role of mix masters. Mixing up the victim is the name of their game. The illusion of Dionysian freedom then drives women into madness. As defined by Honor Moore, madness, M-A-D, stands for male approval and desire. She writes, mad, M-A-D, is the filter through which we are pressed to see ourselves. If we don't seek male approval desire, then we won't get published, sold, or exhibited. I blame none of us for not challenging it, except not challenging it may drive us mad. It is true that the Apollo mask of God drives women into madness too, but this is the madness of one who sees the face of the destroyer, who desires his approval because she knows that she needs this in order to not be raped, maimed, starved to death, imprisoned, brutalized, or murdered. This is a sort of clear-headed type of madness, but the Dionysian method is to break the very boundaries that make such methods in this madness possible. Dionysus, the quote gentleman, unquote, kills women softly. Male approval desire. Madness under his direction lacks a sense of distance from the possessor. A woman driven mad by Dionysus desires the approval of her god because she loves him as herself. She and he are two in one flesh, of one mind. She has lost her sense of self in his house of mirrors, and she does not know whose face she sees. Thus, Dionysus drives women mad with his femininity, which appears to be a relief from the stern masculinity of Apollo. This is the ultimate deceptive glorification of femininity, convincing women that it is desirable for men and also desired by them, luring females into forgetting the falseness of femininity. blinding us to the fact that femininity is quintessentially a male attribute. So yes, that was Mary Daly's sort of apt description of how insidious the tactics are of these males who use ideas of gender bending in various ways to actually compromise the boundaries of the females that they are targeting. How this is dangerous for women because women can absolutely lose their sense of self through this confusion of boundaries. So this is a good thing to keep in mind when we find ourselves giving certain males lots of cookies and head pats for not being completely abusive dickheads. We might actually be not seeing what they're actually doing. The Dionysus, analogy, this is particularly apt in demonstrating the erasure of femaleness, the erasure of female identity, especially that we see going on nowadays with, transgenderism and whatnot. Which is one example that I thought of, males using the performance of femininity as a tool to blur the boundaries between themselves and actual females, would be like what you could see in makeup trends right now. So, women have been taught to wear makeup. Makeup is a part of performing femininity. It's been around for a long time. But if you notice in recent makeup trends, since transgenderism has really picked up in popularity in especially with consumer liberal individualist thinking, what's really popular right now is for this really dramatic drag queen stage type makeup. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think that males who are trying to pass themselves off as females need to use a lot of makeup to feminize themselves, right? Whereas actual females don't need to wear tons of makeup to be recognized as female. But because trans women who are male want to blur the lines between themselves and actual female people, really push for these broader cultural trends of making femininity about wearing lots of heavy stage type makeup that, again, it literally obscures the ability for people to tell the difference between males and females. I mean, you can still tell in a lot of cases, but it does obscure when you're looking at just pictures. And that's the point, right? That's the point, is so that also that women who engage in these behaviors, these femininity rituals of wearing lots of heavy makeup, come to see themselves and their performance of femininity as one and the same. Therefore, if males can perform that same femininity, then they see themselves and these trans women who are actually male as one and the same. And again, that's exactly that demonstration of those Dionysian boundary blurring, right? The more that these men trying to merge themselves with women, the more that they can get actual women to engage in practices of femininity, then the easier it is for them to assimilate themselves into that and to disguise themselves. Because if all you're seeing is the femininity, then, then yeah, we're all the same, right? We're all wearing makeup, we're all wearing lacy things, we all have long hair, we all talk like this, and, we're feminine, and we paint our nails and shit, It's performative, so as long as everyone's performing the same, then it is easier to fall into that thinking where you actually think you are the same. But you're not. You're not the fucking same, dude. Yeah, so it's just some things to think about. This is a tactic, but it's a trap, basically, that women can fall into, and this is very much reflects even when you're just looking at, conservative politics versus liberal politics. There's a trap on either side, right? One is a trap that is easier to see, The other is a trap. It's actually harder to see. The liberal side, men convincing us that they actually understand us or relate with us or are us, can actually reach extents where it becomes even more destructive to women than just the very overt controlling of like women's bodies and just, conservative values that just say that like, oh, women belong in the home and need to make babies or whatever. Like those arguments actually become very easy to challenge and generally start to feel a little less scary, actually, compared to what starts to happen on the Dionysian side, right? The liberal side, where our very thoughts and sense of reality can really start to become contorted. And that just becomes a lot harder to recognize what's going on and to know what to do about it. But generally speaking, I want women to learn to be careful of both sides. Like I said, it's a trap on both sides. We can't just keep running back and forth between them, trying to pick the lesser of two evils each time, We have to start thinking our own way, claiming our own minds, saying no to the male-made constructs that we are fucking swimming in every waking moment of our lives. We have to start carving out something true and authentic to ourselves that has nothing to do with men and has nothing to do with what we've learned from men.